Mm. So welcome back. So what's it today, Chris?
Yeah, I can't wait. Always the highlight of my day. So today we're going to be doing book number 13. It's a book called Resisting Happiness by the author Matthew Kelly.
Hmm.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here, give you a quick visual of the book itself. It's a true story about why we sabotage ourselves, feel overwhelmed, set aside our dreams, and lack courage to simply be ourselves and to start choosing happiness again. The reflection title is 10 Minutes a Day Can Change Your Life. And I'll get to that in a second here. But I got a quick fun story about this book randomly in my life. One of the reasons why I chose it. So if you remember that one book that we read, it was called Off Balance. This is the same author. What if you've ever read the book I Can't Imagine, which I don't know, Blake, if you've finished this yet, but I know Trieu has. The whole fix your basement portion of the book at the end, when I talk about the compound effect of my life all coming together. When I was over at my grandmother's house the night that she told me about her basement story of how that changed her life when she decided to fix her basement. One of the things we actually talked about that night was some of the books that I'd been reading, and she was showing me this one book that her and her book club had been reading, and it was on the table. She was like, God, this has been it's been like a year. We've been going through this book forever. She was like, it seems pretty okay, but I'm just so tired of going at everybody's pace, which is another reason for the anti-book club that we started, where you can just read at your own pace and share with the world. Anyway, that book was Resisting Happiness by Matthew Kelly. So
Oh, okay.
I thought it was really funny. And when I saw this book come up, and some of my random algorithms are that show books that you might be interested in.
Hmm.
When I saw that Matthew Kelly was the guy that read that Off Balance, or that wrote the Off Balance book that we wrote, and then it had like other books by the author. I was like, oh, I've heard of that book before. My grandma was reading it. I was like, I'll check it out. It'll be something to talk to her about. So that was actually how I found this book, and it was a kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
So on with the reflection, I guess. In the book Resisting Happiness, the author Matthew Kelly, he talks about learning when he was 16 years old. He was taught by this guy that, a tip that kind of changed his life a little bit. And he basically said, I mean, he was this guy told him, force yourself to reflect for 10 minutes a day and to kind of sit in prayer, sit in thought, right? Or whatever it may be, for 10 minutes a day. And this reflection is about that. It's about how it changed his life. And a lot of the book that he wrote, you could see the makings of how that 10 minutes a day really did help him to connect with himself, with God, with whatever you want to call it, in his own mind, and to help develop into the life that he developed into, and to stop resisting happiness, I guess, a little bit. So it made me start to think about how, when I discovered the whole 10 minutes a day can change your life in my own world. And that actually happened when we were in the NICU back with my daughter after she had been born. And, I was just searching for anything and everything that I could possibly search for to keep my mind occupied, to try to stay balanced and try to stay present in the moment, and to try to stay focused on her, but doing whatever I could to kind of keep my mind off of the fact that I could lose her at any minute, kind of thing. So the night before, a friend of ours, it was a couple, they dropped off a book that they thought might help us. It was this book called Trusting God Day by Day by the author Joyce Meyer. It was a book of 365 daily reflections about trusting God, and some scripture reading followed by her thoughts. And it was something you could read every day, and get your mind started each morning. So I said, what the hell? Like, I mean, I was desperate for anything. These kind of things hadn't really ever been something I did in my life, I guess, at that point in time, but I took a chance. And my wife and I, we sat down together when we would get home from the NICU each night, and we were able to be together because we couldn't be during the pandemic. And, we read this and thought about it, and, et cetera, et cetera. So that was how my process and my journey of starting my 10 minutes of reflection every day kind of started for my own self. From there, because I was reading this and I had time while I was in the NICU, we were keeping the journal for my daughter. I decided I wanted to journal my thoughts about what I read. Spent the first 5-10 minutes when I would get to the NICU, and I would read the reflection. We kept the book at the NICU, and then I would journal my thoughts about it. And it was how I kicked off my journal. It was how I kicked off my day. It was how I talked to my daughter. It was how I got my mind right going into the NICU, kind of thing. And I started to really enjoy it. Fast forward, years and, multiple years later, I still do that every single morning. And along the way, and as I talk about this in my book, I started to discover what I was actually doing. For the first time in my life, we're the society, the world that we live in, we're just inundated with voices, from all over the place. I mean, we talk about this a lot when we talk about our own, just daily, connects that we have. And you go on LinkedIn, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook or whatever, there's always somebody out there that's just blasting a message into your face, or you go on TV or Netflix or the news or whatever, there's always somebody else who has an agenda and has something they want to shove down your throat, and we're constantly being inundated by other people's thoughts into our head. And it's really can be overwhelming sometimes. Well, one of the people that we don't spend a lot of time with ourselves, from what I discovered, was myself. That was when I really started to connect a lot of the dots internally. That 10 minutes a day was when I started to formulate a lot of thoughts on my spirituality, on learning the stuff that I was reading and learning. It became my way to journal through ideas. It became my way to validate or not validate what Joyce was saying in her daily reflection of trusting God day by day. And, slowly but surely over time, it really did change my life. I echo what Matthew Kelly was saying in this book of, 10 minutes a day can truly change your life. I encourage anybody and everybody to spend some time with yourself, whatever you want to call that, whether that's prayer, God, meditation, spirituality, just talking to yourself. I don't really care what you want to call it, what you want to label it. It's all the same goal. It's to connect with that inner voice inside of you and to get some guidance going forward and to kind of check in and figure out what's actually going on in your own mind. So question that I will pose to you guys is, when was the last time you spent 10 minutes with your own thoughts? Or is there anything that you do every single day that's similar that you would echo as well?
So before I answer that question, can I ask you a different question?
Sure.
What would you think would happen if you did not start on this 10 minutes of reflection through your journey in the NICU? Have you ever thought of something like that? I mean, what would you be? Who we looking at right now?
I don't even know, because I say that because I'm just gonna, I know you can see my screen still. This is my journal from 2022 that I just recently started. Whatever the number is on the screen, add 121, because that was a journal for my daughter.
Mhm.
So
Well, we can't see that part of the screen.
oh, sorry. Today is day 521, and add 121 to that, so 642. So it's been 642 days since I didn't do that. And I don't know, man. I don't think that we ever would have met. I don't think that this year magical learning journey would have started. I don't think I would have written the book that I wrote. I don't think I would have gone on this year magical learning journey. I don't think that I would have any idea what my core values are. I mean, like, the reflection and thinking and formulating your own thoughts is important. Like, you could spend all day long learning and reading every book out there, but if you never take time to think about what you're learning and how you actually think about that, then it's kind of all for naught. Then you're just being inundated by other voices out there in the universe. And it may sound cool in theory, but when you have to filter through your own mind and talk to God or meditate or whatever you want to call it, it changes things. You decide whether or not you actually believe that. I don't know what the self means. I'm not a Buddhist, but something that you talk to yourself in your own head changes things. It's important to just take some time to check in. Sometimes you have a brilliant idea. Sometimes you have no ideas. Sometimes you agree. Sometimes you don't. But it's important to just do the exercise and to do the work and talk to God every day is what I like to call it.
True.
Right.
I knew Chris before he did this. And it is interesting to think about. I remember when I think the shift started happening and how you just kind of, it's not like you changed, but like things changed. And I don't think you would have, especially the person now would definitely not like the person that you would have been. I don't think that person would have been bad, but I mean, again, it was driven. I mean, again, I remember, Chris was my manager at one point. Some of the things I think he taught me back when he was my manager before he started all this, he would probably want to punch himself in the face.
Very, very true. Yeah.
But it wasn't a huge change that happened, but it was kind of like an enlightenment, I guess. It seemed like it started to happen.
Yeah. And I attribute it to this. Like, if I had to distill the essence of the most important thing that I do every single day, it's taking 10, 15 minutes of time to read somebody else's thoughts and then to write my own thoughts about it. And then the snowball is rolling from there. Then I spend another hour writing based off of a book that I wrote. And then the rest of the day kicks off. And then we have these conversations. And I like to think of it as talking to God. That's what I think of as God at this point in time. Like, it's a mutual thing. Like, we are God, God is us, and and it's inside your head. You have that. It's a superpower of ours. Like, if you don't do that, I think you're wasting so much capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, you're wasting your life on earth, and you are, in a funny way, resisting happiness.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think in order for you to be happy, you have to do what it is that is compatible with you.
Right.
So to me, the only voice that is important is your voice. It's good to learn from other people. But at the same time, you have to think about what does that means to me,
Right.
and how do I use it to make
Right.
me have a fulfilling life, a joyful life. So I agree, you have to think about your own thoughts. What does it mean? And why does it make you behave a certain way? And do you like it? If you don't like it, well, you're stressing out. So a lot of times, we are completely being drowned by these different saying and different self-proclaiming gurus out there that tells you, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, and this is the way you should behave, and this and that. And that's great and all, but at the same time, you have to have a balance.
Right.
And knowing what other people do and other people want you to do, it's good, but it's not the absolute path you need to take. You have to ask yourself, do I believe in it? If you don't, and you keep following that without knowing why you follow that path, eventually you're not going to be happy. I think happiness is something that by default, you are on the flow of happiness. It's just seeing things and they are tugging you away from that path, and we are letting them do it. So talking to yourself and reflecting on what you do, you say, well, that is kind of what I want, but at the same time, I want it like slightly different. And so everybody have their own path. And I think talking to yourself and thinking through your thoughts, thinking about the thoughts you have, I think give you a lot of insights. And I think everybody should do it. For me, it's the same thing with similar to you, Chris. I've spent half of my life trying to do what people expect me to do. They say you should do this, you should do that, and I just try to live up to that expectations, up to a point where I hit a midlife crisis and say, well, why am I doing any of these? This doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to do it. It doesn't make me happy. It makes me stress out. So I too started to stop, listen to people, and start listening to myself. And so for me, I do enjoy thinking about, my life, what I do, my thoughts every day. I think about my thoughts
Right.
on a regular basis where I've been thinking. So, and to me, it makes me a happier person than before.
Chris, one thing I noticed seems like when you started doing this, you're a high energy person, but I would say there almost became a little bit of a calmness that kind of came, it seemed like, when you started doing this, or like a sense of peace almost seemed like it was that happened. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. This is like anchor. I talk a lot about this too in the book, the Emilio story, and then my story of rebuilding our city together, I guess, after it all kind of crumbled and what happened to us. But like, I went to a Catholic grade school. I went to a Catholic high school. I grew up in a very Catholic family. I grew up in a world where I knew everything there was to know about the Bible, scriptures, God, yada, yada, yada. I'd never had a conversation with, I don't care if you want to call it God or not. Like, I've never stopped my entire life. I don't know that I've ever spent any time talking to myself. And that's really where God is. I mean, that's our superpowers, our ability to think and imagine and to grow. And, it's a two-way street. The funny thing is God's always there. All you have to do is just stop and talk. Once again, I don't want to call it God. You can call it meditation. You can call it just yourself. I don't care. Whatever you want to call it, it's that voice in your own head that you need to connect with. And when I started to connect with that and started writing down my own, for me, the writing was a really important part of all that, of not just thinking, but the writing forces me to really process what I'm thinking as well. So like, it makes it a little slower, and I can kind of debate with myself a little bit through writing. And it's not just sitting down. It's a deliberate thought from whatever I'm trying to do.
Thinking about thinking.
Right, exactly. So yes, it did give me calm. It gave me my core values. It gave me a relationship with God. It allowed me to find my mission, my purpose. It allowed me to connect with God, and therefore connect with myself, and therefore connect with you guys. I do feel way more calm. I don't worry about, it's the end of our fiscal year right now at Salesforce. I don't care. I don't mean that in like, I don't care about my job or something like that. I mean, like,
But it's
it
not
doesn't
the only,
matter.
when you're content with yourself, you're not fearful of, oh, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to this, that, or that to happen. Right. And so you're not stressed out or worry about something that is in the future that never happens. Oh, I need to close the quarters, or I need to, make sure I do this and I make sure I do that. And so when you have the ability to think about what you think about, those things become secondary. So it isn't, I mean, it's still on your radar and you're still wanting to do that.
Right.
But you tell yourself that's not the worst thing, right? The worst thing is something else. The most important thing is something else.
Yeah. I mean,
Your happiness, your family, whatever your core values are, you place that above everything else. And so having that anchors you, the worry isn't going to affect you and influence you as much.
I think it's really good that you mentioned you take a second to almost debate with yourself, because I think a lot of times we don't do that. And I think our initial reaction, thought about things are oftentimes what we want to tell ourselves, and we don't take the time to debate with ourselves and sometimes come to find the true answer. So I think that's when I found myself doing that. I think I learned a lot about myself, because I think my initial thought reaction to myself, how I viewed myself, whatever it might be, I don't think was very accurate. And then I started to question that and kind of debate it. And I think then finally I kind of got to the truth of some things. So yeah, I think it's good to almost kind of question and debate take the time to do that to yourself sometimes. I don't think very many do.
Yeah, because the thing is, when people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? You think about it. But does anyone ask you, Blake, what do you want to do now? No one does it. So you never think about it. It's like, oh, I have to do this. I have to do these. I need to do these. No one say, oh, I get to do this and get to do that. I want to do this, right? They don't. They say, I have to. No one asks you. So you have to ask yourself, what do you want to be?
Our thoughts are memes at this point in time. They're social memes that just get thrown into our face all day long on, whatever we pop onto, and we're like, oh yeah, that's a good thought. And then we go on back to our day. I don't even know that we
decide if that's a good thought or not. We can say, well, I'm a guru of this, and you should rise, grind, and repeat, and the people will say, oh yeah, we should do that. I said, well, did you think about it before you start celebrating something that people say that may make sense at first? You don't think about it. You don't let it marinate into your thoughts, and you don't think about it. You just take it, and then you go out there and you regurgitate the exact thing you hear to other people, and you're not living it as yourself. You're living it as a machine that regurgitates whatever you get input from, like trash in and trash out.
Right.
And garbage in, garbage out. I mean, that's what I see.
And you end up feeling more lost than where you started. Like, because you're like, this isn't, like, I'm not making any progress in my own life. I don't feel like I know myself better. I feel like, I'm a fraud when I go and talk to somebody and I say, rise, grind, and repeat. And I'm like, that isn't really how I feel, and then all of a sudden you get this dirty, icky feeling inside of you. And, like, it's funny, like how stupid we are, really. I mean, this has been something that people have known for the entirety of humanity. Like, why do you think meditation is so important? Like, why do you think for thousands and thousands of years, people have always said, you need to think? Like, why do you think prayer in church is really important? Because you need to think. Like, why do you think that we've always done all these things, and then all of a sudden, like, it was just some weird cultural thing? No, I mean, this is important. Like, it is important to stop and think and connect with yourself. Like, it's a fundamental human practice.
If anybody watches this, I would want to know in the comments, what was the last time they were sitting, there was no music, there was no TV, there wasn't their cell phone in their hand, where they sat there for 10 minutes, no distractions? Because I can tell you, I want to say, oh yeah, I'm sure I've done that here recently, but you know what? If I don't take the concentrated effort to do it, I mean, I will go days, weeks without doing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often.
This is how I start every day. Like, I don't care where I am, what I'm doing. I can't start my day off without doing this at this point.
A lot of people don't want that silence to have to really be with themselves, and they don't know how to handle it.
I think it gets shrouded in things like church, and I think it gets shrouded in things like religion and things like meditation, and it's confusing. You're like, well, I don't want to go to church to just a thing. You don't have to. Like, God gave us all the equipment to talk to God whenever we want to. Like, you just have to do it wherever you are, whenever you want to. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it gets overwhelming thinking that like, oh, for me to go pray, I need to be in some spiritual frame of mind. Like you can, praying is just talking to yourself. Like, like, I mean, you can do it any day, all day, wherever you want to. So God doesn't give a shit.
Honestly talking to yourself.
Honestly talking to yourself. Hell, I pray. I don't even pray when I go to church. You just sit there and you listen to somebody drone on, and you wait for the bell to ring basically and get out of there, right? Like I find it hard to even think in church because there's just a whole lot of pageantry and shit going on or whatever it may be or something like that. Like you just spend 10 minutes thinking. Like that's all that and that's connecting with God.
Right. And that's do wonders compared to all the hours you spend at church, but you didn't gain anything out of it because you're just going through the motion.
You're not thinking. Yeah, you're not using your own brain. You're not thinking yourself. You're just following along.
And then you live what people expect you to live because, people say, suck it up and take it like a man. Well, what does that mean?
I'm not saying what's in the bulletin is bad either. I think
I mean, that's the thing is people they're missing the point, because you can get the same way, but you go to church and you really think about your own thoughts and talk to God about your own thoughts, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But if you go to church and you fall and you go through the motion, you're not getting anything out of it.
Well, what is confession?
Confession is not the same thing because confession is you telling someone about something you did, but you don't reflect on whether you did it, whether you are really, because like if I did something or I did something, did I really think it's wrong, right? If people say it's wrong, I told the priest that I did it, and he said, "Well, I absolve you of your sin." Well, I don't feel anything. I go out there and do it again. The mafia do it all the time. They go to church and say, "Hey, I killed this guy," and then he comes out and he does it again. So what's the point? But I mean, if you think about, reflect on yourself, then you say, "Well, that I did is wrong. I'm going to stop."
Right. It violated these core values, and I need to think through that, and I need to talk through that in my own head, and I need to understand why that matters to me. Like that's this sounds so basic because it is. Like, I mean, it is literally our most fundamental thing that anybody can do anywhere. I just
don't do it.
And nobody does. I mean, I don't want to say nobody does it, but I would venture to say that very few people. Right. Not only that, it gets even worse, I think, because then we start to think of things like meditation or mindfulness or whatever, right? Those are confusing as hell. Like those are you feel like you need to go
100,000 ways to meditate.
Right.
So which way is correct?
There is none. The only correct way is to connect with yourself in any way, shape, or form you want to connect with. Think of Buddhism or something along those lines. You think of like Taoism or whatever it is, whatever spirituality it is. You think you have to have this elaborate chapel or room or like all these pillows or some space you got to go to with some Zen Buddhist, like
you're gonna get some sort of enlightenment afterwards.
Right. So. All they're doing is just sitting and thinking. Like you could do that right now. After this conversation's over, you could sit for 10 minutes and think and write down your thoughts. And that's that.
Yes.
Honestly.
And they would change your life.
Hard work. You got to do it. It needs to be honest. I think that's what a lot of people, maybe
you're talking to yourself. If you're not honest with yourself, you're not getting anything out of it.
The point, people want to be able to live with themselves. They want to.
Because I'm not asking you if you're talking to yourself. It's for your own benefit.
Right.
I've done this every day. I mean, you don't, I don't care because it's your thing. So do it and do it honestly with yourself. So you want to lie to yourself? If you want to do that, that's fine. But what's the point of lying to yourself?
Right.
People do it all the time. I think they
do. I've done it. Yeah. For whatever benefit that is, I don't know, but you're not getting anything out of it. You're not going to change your life by going through the motion. That's my
they're currently doing, and not question it, not think they could do it differently or better. It's I'm doing what I need to do, and it's okay, and there's a reason why, and it's justifying your own actions. No matter what you do, you just justify your own actions.
Because when you're talking to yourself, you're not defending your actions to someone. Because if I do something, even though it's wrong, and I'm talking to someone, I'm going to defend it regardless. Reasonably defending a position that to me is not logical, because we have that tendency to defend what we did. But when you're talking to yourself, you're not defending anything against anyone. So
you're just
come out and say, "Well, was I a jerk to that person?" Oh, yeah. I mean, I can really judge myself truly on that scale versus if you accuse me of being a jerk, I say, no, I'm not being a jerk. I have other reasons why. I'm like, oh, I was a jerk because of this or because of that. I'm just making an excuse. But when you're talking to yourself, really, well, it's up to you to judge whether that action aligns with your core values or aligns with the characteristic you want. If I want to be a nice person, then well, maybe I should have done that. So I'm gonna dial down a little bit.
And you get a chance to redo it every day when you do that, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you can make a stupid mistake every day of your life. What I care about is, am I doing the actions that reflect what I say that matters to me, right? Like, so like, as long as I'm doing that, like, and we're going to talk about this way later on, in other subsequent books. Actually, one of them was called Lying by Sam Harris. And that was my reflection, was the only person you can lie to is yourself. And another one was the Bhagavad Gita. And, it's about disconnecting from the outcomes of life and everything like that. Just do the work and the actions that reflect back your values, and
The outcome will be okay.
redo, and the outcome will be okay. Like, that's called karma, right? It all comes from you talking to yourself and figuring out, like, what is important to me, and am I doing that? Like, that's really it.
Simple. Sounds so simple.
So just kind of wrapping up for today, if anybody's listening out there, the question for you is, when was the last time you spent 10 minutes, with your own thoughts? And if you don't do that, like, hopefully this conversation will encourage you to give it a try. And as Matthew Kelly and myself learned, it can change your life.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.